First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion. We're going to talk about how inmates will try to mold a staff's perspective in order to get what they want. We're going to do a group of videos, another perspective on manipulation. We're going to kind of take you through a path. I'm using the word method. I got it from a book called Methods of Persuasion. So actually it's methods. And each letter means something in regards to how you can get someone to be persuaded. I'm actually using that as how you can get someone to be manipulated. To me, in our world, persuasion and manipulation, they're very similar. They're very similar in regards to the tactics that can be employed. So how we break it down is M is for mold your perspective, which we're going to explore a little tonight and probably again later in the week because there's a lot to cover in each topic. And then the E for method is elicit congruent attitudes. The T is trigger social pressures. The H is habituate your message. Now, mind you guys, this is all done before the request is provided. So even when we talk about molding staff's perspective, that's done before the actual request is offered. Then the next two, which is the O and the D, is actually when the request has been given, which is optimize the message. That's the O. And the D is drive their momentum. And the last thing is once the message is done, there's the S, which is sustain their compliance. So again, this comes from a book called Methods of Persuasion, but it wasn't written to be utilized this way. But since we work in a prison setting, we know that things written in good intent can easily be bad, depending on who's reading it, depending on that perspective. I know a while ago, I'm like, I love all these self-help books. And before I got into corrections, I would read how these books could help me. Now I read as how these books can be used against me. It's a little bit of a different perspective now since I'm in corrections. And of course, my guest today is none other than Connie Alleyne, the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. What's up, Connie?
Hello, everybody. Connie Alleyne here. I'm the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. And I don't know how I let Anthony get me into this discussion about persuasion, but certainly I think the way persuasion shows up in our environment is very different from the way the academics write the books, right? And so I think it's great that we have these discussions because this book may not be on a list that somebody cannot read, right? And who knows if they've already read some of these kind of books, just like The Laws of Power. It's just, it's really good, I think, that we bring these discussions to the platform so that we can start to look at things a little more critically.
And I think that's the key, guys, is to kind of see how these books can be applied to our world. And I know for a fact when these books are written, they're not written for our world. So it's great to see what we're able through our experience to kind of, create as we're reading it, just another perspective. So we have to kind of fish for the knowledge that we want. That's just, it is what it is. We don't have that many books out there that give us exactly what we need. So sometimes we got to just make it. Find a book and say, you know what, this can be applied. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor. When we come back, we're going to be talking about molding staff's perspective. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
All right, guys. So we're going to be covering molding staff's perspective. Now, I believe we may have to visit this a few times before we move on to some more letters of the acronym. But with that said, I think this is a great official way to start things off. We've covered manipulation before, but this kind of gives us this path. So the first path, obviously, and again, this is before the request is given, is to mold our perspective. So let me go with Connie first. Connie, when we come into this profession, right, and we come in to do the right thing, we come in for the right reasons. I mean, we just did a video about having pride in what you do. When it comes to inmates or manipulative inmates trying to mold our perspective, in my mind, is that they're trying to take us away from this pure foundation of integrity, professionalism, so forth and so on, into something that's easier for them to control and maneuver. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of leveling the playing field, right? So we are the professionals, and by virtue that we're the professionals, we have the authority. And so if there are other ways that the inmates can try to kind of circumvent our authority and sort of allow us to sort of let our guards down, they're going to try to find those ways. And I feel like this is kind of that workaround that, you know what, this person may have the official authority over me, but if there's a way that I could persuade that person to kind of let those guards down a little bit, I can get in there.
Right. And I want people to understand this, guys. This is very key. We're not talking about a surface shift, you know, maybe a quick behavior that, you know, is not meant to replay later on. We're talking about a foundational shift, because that's the only way you're going to sustain compliance, right? It means that you come in with this set of beliefs. Those beliefs are an obstacle to me as a manipulative inmate. So I need to do what I can to change your perspective, which ultimately changes the foundation. If I change the foundation, now it helps me to, you know, have that longevity with the game that we're looking to play. So Connie, I just want people to understand how important that foundation is. When you know, you get your training, whatever it is, and they create that foundation. I would like to think, first of all, if you come in with a sense of integrity, you know, in order to be in corrections, you got to at least have that, and we can cultivate from that. That's great. We can improve that, but you got to have a level of integrity, a level of trust, a level of professionalism, and then we can help make it better, obviously. But you got to come in with these things. The last thing you guys want to do is you don't want to ever change that foundation. That foundation is such a great centerpiece for where you need to be throughout your career, throughout the course of your 25 or 30 years. Now, for manipulative inmates, that's an obstacle for them. So I'm not looking to just get you to do something foolish for that one moment. I'm looking to see how long we can carry this on, how long we can keep this going. So in order for me to kind of have a little length to this game, what do I have to do? I got to attack your foundation. I got to attack the way you look at things, the way you justify what you do, and more importantly, the way you believe in what you do. Would you agree with that, Connie?
Yeah, I was actually about to say, when you were talking about that, one thing that came to my mind was they are observing you to see those moments when your integrity is compromised, right? So like, if I can't necessarily make you do that, if I've been able to identify a time or a space where you did something that you probably weren't supposed to do, and it may seem something minor, right? It's just knowing that it's a possibility for me to get in there, right? And I feel like that's almost like the opening. Like, okay, so at the exterior is this person is, you know, they're solid in their integrity, they're solid in who they are from a professional standpoint, and I just can't get in there because they're not gonna, you know, willingly give up their power or authority to me. But if I can observe this person for long enough, like, so the long game is I'm looking to see where they slip up. I'm looking to see where they might be a little vulnerable, or where there might be some room for me to kind of get in there, you know. So I've kind of, so part of the academic side of me was I had taken this class on negotiation, which is how I heard about the author you were referring to, Cialdini. I think I'm saying his name wrong, but part of that process, when they start talking about harnessing the science of persuasion, is part of negotiation, right? And so if you're negotiating business deals, you're looking at sort of the kinks in the armor, right? You're looking at what are the weaknesses, what are the things that I could sort of play on. And one of the things they talk about is someone's eloquence being something that they use, right? And so how many times, as you were talking, I'm like, wow, how many times has there been that charismatic inmate, right? That you're like, yo, this dude could talk his way into anything. He's just so charismatic. He's likable, right? Like those are the things that he's using to navigate this environment, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. So like, as you're talking about just, all these just different avenues, and prior to our conversation, you were talking about priming. I'm like, these are the things that people are pulling on to try to like use as leverage against us in the facilities.
Yeah, right. So you're Robert Cialdini. Now he wrote the book Influence, which is a book that I modeled off my Inmate Manipulation Decoded, right? Now, with that said, he later came out with a book about 20 or 30 years later called PreSuasion, which is basically how you set somebody up before the kill. And that's sort of the priming, that's part of it, obviously. So another person that advanced on Robert Cialdini's studies was Nick Kalenda, who wrote Method of Persuasion. And that's where the steps I mentioned, methods, come from. Now, again, it was never applied to the prison setting. That's where we have to kind of use our minds. That's where sometimes I read a book as a Gangi. Why do you read a book about sales? Because I could be working with a lot of salesmen. They're trying to sell me something, so it's good it's curious to see what their perspective is. And then I try to see if I can apply that perspective to our world. I mean, again, this whole book is really founded on my experience, yes, intertwined with theories of how to be a better salesman. So it's crazy how those theories ran together,
Yeah.
So same thing here. Molding someone's perspective to me is one of the first things that you need to do if you're a manipulative inmate, to shift that person's mindset into something that's going to help grant that request. Now, again, that can come in many ways. Connie mentioned priming. We'll go into that. But I want to kind of run a scenario and tell me if this makes sense. Again, we're not going to be able to cover every scenario because obviously manipulative inmates can be very inventive. But we could do enough to give you guys an idea. So I'm just going to ask this right to Connie. And then maybe Connie can kind of explain what's happening here. Connie, you're a unit officer or medical, whatever it is. I'm an inmate. And as soon as I see you, Connie, thank God you're here today. So what's happening here right now? What is the inmate trying to do? Now, mind you guys, maybe some inmates, for the right reasons, are happy because maybe when Connie's there, they know they're going to get professionalism. They know they're going to get fair, honest, professionalism, whatever it is. But we always have to worry about that wolf that's in sheep's clothing. So again, let's pretend I'm that manipulative inmate. I'm that wolf. Connie, I'm so happy you're here today.
So of course, the first thing is like, okay, well, what do you want? Right? Because I feel like that doesn't just come out of nowhere. The next thing I would be thinking is, you call me Connie, we're not friends, right? There's a problem. No, well, it happens, right? And so some people respond to that. And so here it is, the inmate is trying to make us more familiar with each other than we are. And so those who are watching this exchange see this inmate say, hey, Connie, it's so good to see you. I'm so happy you're here today. Like, so why does Connie evoke happiness in this inmate, right? Like, what is there between Connie and this inmate that we need to start thinking about? And then you also have to think, okay, so now he's trying to establish this. If I don't have my wits about me, I might be like, oh, hey, it's good to see you too, right? Hopefully I wouldn't be reciprocating that, right? But if you do, there's a message in the reciprocation or in that reciprocity, right? And so I think we cannot take for granted when you have that charismatic inmate who is likable, who is going to come up and try to initially get your guard down by making the exchange an unprofessional one.
I love what you said too, because you said it right at the very end, to let your guard down. So, okay, so maybe I added the Connie. I wasn't a full 100% inmate there. I kind of was a mixture of an inmate and then just us on Tier Talk. But yeah, you're right. It does happen. Inmates sometimes try to see if they can use the first name. I would like to think if an inmate was to make an attempt to use a first name, that would be a crazy wake-up call for anybody. I hope that's a crazy wake-up call. But you're right. It happens. I know I've seen a lot of older staff who's been in the business for a while when they're dealing with older inmates. They kind of have this unique rapport. And I do see first names, which I'm not a big fan of. Obviously, we discussed that before. But you're right. The inmates coming in trying to set up an atmosphere, in my mind, where it's going to start being harder for you to say no to whatever that request is. Now, again, the request isn't there. The request may not come right away. Maybe it's a buildup. Maybe it's a delay, but eventually it could happen. But even if it doesn't, you should still make note of, why are you so happy that like Connie said, that I'm here today? What is it about the person that worked beforehand? Let that person explain themselves. Oh, hey, Gangi, thank God we have you. You're not like one of them. Well, first off, I am one of them. And, again, explain yourself. Make them make them know that you're not accepting that at face value. Because I like what Connie said. The moment you accept that, whether it's that smile, the nod, whatever it is, it kind of opens up that environment, that friendly environment where, okay, you know what? I'm getting it's like a weird feeling that starts to happen between you and that individual, as if now you, as the staff member, have a level of expectation that you must meet to be in the unit overseeing that inmate. Does that make any sense, Connie?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that you also have to call to question is that when it is the you, like, why is this inmate trying to differentiate me from everybody else, right? And some people who might be very full of themselves, they'd be like, yeah, because I'm the man, I'm the woman, I make sure everything runs smooth. Others may be like, well, I know that this person is just as good as me. So what's the butter up for? Why am I getting this special stuff that's coming from this inmate right now? And, the first thing I think of is, what are they preparing me for? Or at least trying to prepare me for? Because there's nothing special that I do on this unit, and I don't even know this inmate, right? There is no special relationship between us. And a lot of times we have to take a pause and actually establish or reestablish that boundary, right? Because it's okay to call it out. Be like, what are you talking about? Don't talk to me like that. There's ways to make sure you draw the line in the sand so that inmate knows, okay, she's not the right one for whatever I was preparing for, but I must say that if they do that over and over again, it does soften the person. So not like you're going to all of a sudden become unprofessional, but there's a way that it's kind of, I guess the way you said it, it's a little harder for you to say no, because this inmate has now started to establish some sort of rapport with you. And you might feel guilty about saying no, but no is no. And I feel like, sometimes you catch somebody on an off day, right? Because sometimes that just might be it. Someone's going through something personal. Maybe that's the reason why the inmate is coming at you that way, because they know that there's something personal going on. They overheard you talking to somebody about it. They overheard others talking about you, and you don't even know that they know you're in a vulnerable place, and they're just going to try to capitalize on it at the time.
Yeah, and Connie, obviously that's spot on. I think that's what it is. I think that they know you're vulnerable and they're trying to play that game to build that connection. And guys, I'm going to tell you something. Sometimes it can be hard to say no. It could be, especially if you allow this inmate to try to foster that relationship. The reason why you have to nip it immediately is so it doesn't become impossible to say no. And then the other avenue is it's going to be fucking awkward, but not for you. For them. Don't take it as if it's going to be awkward for you because you decide to nip this rapport, because the inmate knows what they're doing. They want to make it difficult. So, you got to nip it in the bud. And remember, we talked about the longevity. These are subtle things that they do that over the course of time really adds up. So this is what I say is it really a shift in our foundation. So in an effort to protect it, the moment you feel that the ground is not as sturdy as it used to be, grab your footing again and then see where the concern is and direct it, because that's all you have. And Connie, I want to revisit something. I mentioned something. I want to get your thoughts on it. So when you have an inmate that says, I'm glad it's you today, or thank God you're here, or wow, you're not like one of them, I kind of stepped into something that I want to explore that I've never explored it this way before. But do you feel when an inmate says that, right off the bat, they are pushing a level of expectation?
So I think they're pushing expectation. I guess they could be, but in my mind, I may not know the work style of the person or people they're comparing me to. So it may not immediately click to me that there is some sort of expectation that they're pushing that I either will meet or not meet, or I'll exceed it, right? Like whichever way. But I think the fact that they're even putting it out there, it is already like getting you to think differently, right? You're thinking a little differently about not necessarily your role or your responsibilities, but the way you engage with that inmate might shift a little bit, because now this inmate has shown you some appreciation that you might not be getting, right? From your higher ups, or even your colleagues for that matter. So I think I think what I'm trying to get at, kind of,
I think you just made me actually hit on to something just now as I'm listening to you. And you know me, I never cut you off, but I really want to get your thoughts on this. So this is more of me just trying to elaborate something, but you just hit on something right now that I think maybe can further explain my thought. Do you think when the inmate says these remarks, again, you're the only one, whatever, oh, it's great having you today, whatever the remarks were that we just said, do you think that's also an effort to make the staff member think, well, let me be careful how I move here because I don't want to upset that inmate?
I don't know if that's it. Like, I think it's a possibility, but like, I don't know that you care about upsetting an inmate, right? Like,
no, you know what I mean? I'm saying, but you think you're right. I'm thinking about the attempt from the inmate is to do that. You're right. Staff should not care. Their job's their job, 100%. But I think when the inmate says it, you think that's also a hidden attempt to say, this is a good way to keep this person in these parameters?
Possibly, yes. And I think it's also a way for the inmate to try to separate you from the pack, right? So like if I can isolate you, right, whether it's I'm making you feel special and then you're going to act differently, I'm pulling you away from how all officers are. And I think that mentally that may have some bearing, right, in how you conduct yourself.
Yeah, because I guys, this was just discovered as we're going through it now. But think about that. Even something as simple as, wow, I'm happy it's you today, or you're not like them. There is an expectation that the inmate's trying to get across, even though they're not saying it, it's definitely implied. And then how you respond to that, right? So whether I, nod or smile, either way, I'm not resistant to it. I accept it. Look what that does. that puts the inmate in a lot of control, because now, in my opinion, in the back of your mind, you know, however it is, you're trying to kind of guide yourself based on that expectation the moment the inmate said it when you come into the unit, right? Because, you know, if you embrace it, in my mind, and you don't say nothing against it, that means that you are taking it in.
Yeah, you're receiving that.
Right. So do you feel there could be some effort for the inmate to kind of set up these parameters, even though I'm not actually saying it? Think about it. I give you these compliments, you acknowledge these compliments, but now how do you got to keep those compliments, right? You got to keep in good favor, right? So what does that mean? That means that you can't be like those other officers who are doing their job. Would you agree? Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, you're making sense. I mean, it's almost like you've now got the positive reinforcement coming from the inmate, right? And what happens when you give someone positive reinforcement, right? They continue the behavior because they like the positive reinforcement. But I think that only really comes into play if you actually value what the inmate is saying. So if the inmate somehow connects to something that's foundational to you, I could see that really being a thing, which is dangerous.
Yeah, 100%, because you don't know it.
Yeah,
I think when that inmate comes in, and I'm going to still call it an expectation, again, you know, from the inmate, we may not realize, guys, again, we're discovering this as we go along, but, you know, that also sets up a tone for you, you know, how they're expecting you to be the rest of the shift. And then here's the scary thing. Guys. The conflict is not going to come from you not doing your job. The conflict is going to come from you not meeting the expectation of an inmate. So now, again, we're going to kind of move a little further ahead, but eventually we'll explore it later on in more detail. But when we talk about eliciting congruent attitudes, you know, now your justification, even though it may not be something that you realize is surface, in the back of your mind, you're playing out what that inmate said right at the very beginning. You're not like one of them. Thank God you're here today. You know, because on the adverse, like Connie said, what does that mean when an inmate says, thank God you're here today? That means, thank God someone else isn't. Right? I mean, pretty much, right? And I'm assuming that someone else is going to be a professional who does their job the way it's supposed to be. Now, when that inmate sets that standard of how they expect you to run that unit, even though they don't specifically say it, they just say, thank God it's you today. We're so happy to have you. Well, now the problem is, if that gets you as soon as you get in and your foundation's a bit weary, look what now becomes the foundation. This is going to become the foundation. Yeah, you know, again, and that is a great way for inmates to start molding your perspective, because here's the thing, guys, they didn't just attack a behavior. If you look at the way we just said it as we were walking through it, they went all the way down to how we justify what we do. A simple compliment, if misused. That's why in this business, you can't take compliments, even if it is a well-meaning compliment with no ulterior motive. It doesn't matter, because in the end, they all can have a motive. Universal precaution. Hey, Connie, this is actually, we'll keep this one quick, because we're going to have, I think the next topic, we have to explore this part again, because I want to cut into more with priming, and I want to talk about what we call anchoring and high expectations. And I kind of don't want to go too far off where we just left, because I think we just discovered something, and I think it's very important. And I think that the next topic, same thing, we're still going to be talking on molding staff's perspective. I think we can explore a little more into how inmates can try to shift that perspective. But I just want people to know that the reason why it's dangerous, guys, is because this isn't surface. This is foundational. This is eventually how we start to justify our behavior that winds up causing a conflict with who we are and the role we're supposed to perform. Now, if we look at it just to kind of, you know, revisit something that we just said, think about that officer right now that gets that expectation, right? And in the back of their mind, they go to make a decision. They're not looking at what's right for the facility. They're looking at Well, how do I maintain, the good graces of this inmate? If that's the case, if you have someone that's slowly being turned. So now their decisions, even if they were in conflict, they're not in conflict anymore. The sad thing is, when the conflict's going to come in? When they have to write that inmate up. When they have to write that inmate up, that's when they start feeling the conflict. And that's when you've been compromised. Would you agree with that part, Connie?
For sure. Because you're now put in a position where you become not likable, right? You're no longer in that inmate's good graces. And you come now in this position where there's no reciprocity, right? Where before you may not have been responding to the inmate's words, but now you're actually going opposite to sort of the direction that they've been kind of pushing you towards. And I know in this space, the challenge I'm thinking is that your authority by virtue of your title is going to always supersede whatever the game is, right? So like if you're doing your job, your reality is that the responsibilities inherent in your title will always help put that inmate in their place, right? Whether you feel that you can do it yourself or not. Wow, that was a new one for me. I'm like, where did that thought come from? But I was just thinking that, ultimately we got jobs to do. And when the inmates are playing games or doing whatever they're trying to do, the reality is that if you take your job seriously and you do your job based on policy and procedure, those policies and procedures will protect you because you have to act in accordance of that based on your title, based on the authority inherent in your title, regardless of, hey, it's great to see you today, whatever the, like it doesn't even matter. So, I'm just thinking there's ways that we do help save ourselves if we actually, do what we're supposed to do.
Well, you're right. Obviously the policies and procedures are the lifeblood of any facility. And, guys, there's a universal precaution. I mean, do we go too far in our dialogue? Guys, we're going to have people here that are going to say that happened to them. Inmate came up and, hey, love the fact that you're in this unit and stuff like that. And these are things we need to explore a little more. Why the inmates say that? What's the purpose? But we also have to realize that the information we give you, yes, there is a wolf, but not all the time. Sometimes a gesture could be a gesture, an innocent gesture, but how do you know that? How are you able to have the resources at that moment to figure it out? So we've been always trained to universal precaution. So the magic here is that we give you the advice, but, see if it needs to be applied. But it's just to get you to ask the right questions. Like the last thing I want is, a phone call. Hey, Gange, guess what? You'd be proud of me. Well, what happened? And then they came up to me and said, how are you? And I threw that fucker to the ground. And wait, you know what I mean? Wait a second. That's not what I meant by what we're teaching. All I'm saying is just to kind of be careful because sometimes things that aren't said can have the most power over you. Just remember that because you don't realize it. It's not so surface. Sometimes you wind up reacting to something that wasn't said. And again, you don't realize it's happening because you're it's hitting you under the subconscious level. And I just want to make sure that we're always aware that at any time, there could be that wolf. There could be that wolf that's out to get your job and out to play you. So it's good to kind of see how far these dialogues go. Hey, Connie, anything you'd like to say in closing?
I just want to say, be safe out there. It's like, keep your wits about you. I mean, because I'm just thinking we had a whole conversation, a whole discussion, was it almost 40 minutes, just about one statement, right? And just to think through the course of your career, how many statements do we hear? How much do inmates say to us, right? Like, and sometimes we take it for granted because it's just, whatever, right? The longer you've been on the job, the less you react to stuff like that. But the reality is that if you're constant, like the consistency of hearing things like that can wear down on who you are, on your values, on like your foundation. And so, you know, maybe we shouldn't be as dismissive as we usually are. So all I can say is just keep your wits about you.
I love what you said too. Dismissive in our world, an inmate gets no response. That means you've accepted it. Because guys, believe it or not, the inmates expect a response from you. They expect the no, and they expect the write-ups. They expect all that. The moment you don't respond or you accept it is now they know I got you. So, and again, you know, it's okay to talk to inmates. You know, I don't want people to think, hey, Gangi, be proud of me. An inmate tried to talk to me the other day. It's like, no, hold on. Just take everything, you know, with a grain of salt that we provide. There is a message here. And it's not meant to say, hey, you can't talk to an inmate or they can't. It's just a matter of you always have to be in control. And don't be afraid. Remember, the person asking questions is the one that's in control. You know, I have no problem. An inmate says, hey, Gangi, I love having you here today. Ask me why. What is it that I'm doing that's so different? You know, or what is it? Let me know. You know, because I'm curious what makes me so special. And even the fact that you just asked that question, you know, that puts them on alert. Because how's that person going to answer it? Because you let us live. So I let you break the rules. Is that what you're saying? You know, is that why you want me here? You know, let me go back and reevaluate how I do my job now. Because what you think is a strength for me, Mr. Inmate, is actually not a strength for me. So I don't want to be separated from my peers when they say, well, I'm glad you're here and not them. Because now I'm going to start asking myself. So now here's the funny thing. There's two ways of answering this, guys, right now. When an inmate comes up and gives you something like that, I'm glad you're here today, or you're not like one of them. Remember, we said the wrong response is to try to keep that expectation with the inmate. Don't do that. That's the wrong response. The right response is to go back to the drawing board and see what you're doing wrong. You know, if every one of your peers is doing a job this way and the inmates want you to be in that unit, that's another sign. Then you don't need to go back and look at yourself from the inmate's perspective. Look at yourself from the staff and say, maybe I'm doing something wrong. You know, and keep that as your momentum. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. Stay safe.